Chapter 556 9 p.m. As Amanda stared at the familiar building in the distance, her footsteps slowed. Matching her pace, Ren's footsteps also slowed. They eventually stopped in front of the building. "We're here," Amanda muttered softly as she raised her head up, her face basking beneath the gentle moonlight. In no time at all it was already nighttime and Amanda felt the whole day pass by in a blur. It was fun, she thought as she turned her head to gaze at Ren's profile. While he may look different from how he once did, as she gazed in his direction, she could not help but feel her heart racing. Amanda had never felt this way before and it felt refreshing. This was especially true after everything that had happened to her. Now that I think about it, all of this happiness is because of him, isn't it? From risking her life to save her mother, to saving her father from the demon world. After meeting him, Amanda's dark world began to lighten to the point that she didn't dread waking up in the morning like in the past. She no longer had to wake up in an empty home with no one to greet her in the morning. She no longer had to worry about her father's safety every day, and she no longer felt as empty as before. Truly, while he may not have done it specifically for her, he had changed her life for the better and she was grateful for him. Before she knew it, her mouth opened on its own. "Thank you. Thank you." Turning to look at her, Ren cocked his head a little. "Are you thanking me for today?" "No." Meeting his gaze, Amanda shook her head before interlocking her hands behind her back. Slowly she took a step toward the building. "Thank you for everything. For saving her mother. For saving her father. For brightening up her cold world. For letting her meet new people who treat her with warmth. And for existing. Thank you." "Sure." Clearly confused, Ren tilted his head further. Then recalling something, he tapped on his bracelet. It was at that moment that a large teddy bear appeared in his hands. There was an immediate pause in Amanda's steps. "Isn't that Nola's bear?" Visit for a better user experience. "Nope." Shaking his head, Ren stepped forward and brought the bear toward her. A small grin spread across his face. "You think I wouldn't notice your secret glances at the bear?" An embarrassed look flashed across Amanda's face as she felt her cheeks warm up a little. "Was I that obvious?" "You were." Ren's voice echoed out as he seemed to have read her mind. Amanda's cheek became even warmer as a result. She then turned her head to look away from him. "Are you going to take it or not?" But it was at that moment that she heard Ren's voice. Feeling the bear touch her body, Amanda turned her head slightly and softly bit her lips. "My arms are starting to hurt. If you don't take it, I'll give 2 bears to Nola." "I'll take it." Unable to contain herself anymore, she snatched the bear from Ren's hands as he hugged it tightly. Her simple yet innocent actions were clearly caught by Ren, who unknowingly smiled. Tapping onto his bracelet once more, he said, "I've got something else for you." Immediately after he said those words, Amanda suddenly felt a terrifying pressure coming from Ren as she was forced to take a step back. Ugh. Her hair fluttered behind her as a strong gust of wind blew on her clothes. Suddenly, Amanda caught sight of a small frame in Ren's hand amid a nebulike black hue. She couldn't quite make out what it was due to the nebulike hue. However, it wasn't long before the hue receded. When she raised her hand to get a better look, her eyes opened wide in surprise. "Isn't that a bow?" "It is." Ren replied as a powerful hue sprung out from his body, covering the black nebula and forcing it to shrink. Following his actions, everything around them once again returned to normal as Ren apologetically looked at her. "Sorry, I didn't expect this to happen. It looks like the high mana density here has somehow excited the bow." After testing the bow to ensure that it was not acting up anymore, Ren handed it to her. "Here. For me. Who else but you can use the bow?" Upon hearing his confirmation, Amanda lowered her head to gaze at the bow. This bow. She was left astonished and shaken by the tremendous pressure the bow emanated when her eyes locked on it. "That's at least ranked." It had to be noted that even ranked artifacts were very rare. Each one of them went for an astronomical amount of money. One such example was Monica's sword, which sold for billions of U back at the auction. They were so rare that even her guild only had a couple of them. And none of them were bows. The value of the bow Ren was giving her was simply tremendous. The latest studies are on website. So much so that Amanda was starting to feel conflicted. Ever since I've met him, all he's done is schlep me while I. Gently biting her lips, Amanda secretly clenched her fist. Thinking of her past, she realized that she had never truly helped Rin the way that he helped her. She was always on the receiving end. There were times when she had also helped him, but compared to what he did for her, they were negligible. And she hated that. I want to help him. Help him as he had helped her. I'll take it. And that was exactly why she firmed her mind and decided to take the bow. Amanda had no reason to reject the bow in the first place. If she took the bow, her power and usefulness to Rin would increase dramatically. Rejecting her would do nobody any good. She wasn't one who didn't see the bigger picture, and refusing the bow simply because she felt she owed too much to Rin would come across as though she was insecure on her part. If she wanted to be of help in any way, shape or form, she had to take the bow, and she understood it. I'll use this bow to help Rin. Extending her hand, she soon came into contact with the bow. Ugh. An explosive force erupted from the bow the moment Amanda touched it, forcing her to take a step back. Regardless, gritting her teeth, she continued to press her hand against the bow as she firmed her grip on the grip of the bow. Even then, the bow proved to be a lot harder to handle than she originally thought as her mana started to quickly deplete. Kate, let me help a bit. In the midst of her struggle, she heard a gentle voice from beside her. A short time after hearing the voice, the pressure on Amanda began to ease and the power erupting from the bow slowly receded. After that, the wild aura coming from the bow quickly calmed down, and it wasn't long before Amanda was finally able to fully control the bow as she firmly held it in her hands. With heavy breaths, she glanced in Ren's way from the corner of her eyes. Thank you. While she still struggled to properly control the bow as her rank was still not enough to properly wield it, she was now able to somewhat bear the pressure. Taking a couple of deep breaths to catch her breath, Amanda suddenly felt Ren's grip loosen from her shoulder. How do you feel? Tired. Amanda replied with a bitter look on her face. She truly did not expect Ren to suddenly pull out such a strong bow, let alone give it to her. Regardless, staring at the bow in her hands, Amanda felt a weird sense of closeness. Looking at the bow's frame that seemed to blend perfectly with the night sky, she thought. So beautiful. Amanda finally had a chance to take a good look at the bow now that it had calmed down, and she became able to appreciate its true beauty. There was a subtle yet majestic glow emanating from out of its beautifully carved frame that seemed to be meticulously carved by hand by a master. In addition, its weight also seemed to perfectly balance in Amanda's hand. It felt as though it was handcrafted just for her. Visit for a better user experience. It was an odd yet satisfying feeling. It's perfect. Amanda thought as she raised and lowered her hand. The bow was without a question even better than her current bow. Nightfall, an ranked bow that she had been wielding for the past couple of years. Without a doubt, this bow was far superior to it in any way, shape, or form. I'll make good use of it. Amanda muttered as she firmed her grip on the bow. I'm glad you like it. Rin replied with a smile. There were hints of relief as he scratched the back of his head. I didn't know if you would have liked it, to be honest. Although it's an ranked artifact, it still looks kind of you. No, it's perfect. Cutting Rin off, Amanda raised her head to look at him. Deeply staring into his eyes, she put the bow away. Hey Rin. Amanda called out. Yes. Leaned forward a bit. Rin looked at her with a confused look on his face. Nevertheless, he complied. What is I? The events that followed felt like a blur to Amanda. It all happened so fast that it took her a couple of seconds to realize what she had done, and when she realized what she had done, it was already too late as Rin stared blankly at her. To Amanda's surprise though, she neither felt flustered nor shy. Staring at Rin, her smile softened and she turned around. Lowering her head, she gently bit her lips before she murmured in a low whisper. Thank you. Without looking back, she walked back into the building, leaving Rin standing outside with a blank expression. Click. Welcome back, Rin. The sound of my mother's voice welcomed me into the apartment. But to be honest, at this very moment, everything just felt weird to me as I just merely greeted her with a nod. I couldn't quite process everything around me as a weird feeling surged from within me. A feeling that I couldn't understand. In the end, much to the confusion of my mother and Nola, I walked toward my room and shut the door behind me. Click. When I reached my bed, I sat down on it and just blankly stared at the ceiling of the room for what felt like a very long time. My mind was a bit of a mess at the moment as I struggled to comprehend the events of today. It was a fun day. So much so that it felt as though time was flowing at a different speed than usual. It was a strange yet pleasant feeling. Never before have I ever felt as relaxed as I did today. I thought that this feeling would continue till the date ended, but, slowly raising my hand to touch my lips, I softly murmured. Soft. Chapter 557. Rin, are you listening to me? As I absent-mindedly lifted and lowered the spoon in my hand, I heard a familiar voice tickle my ears. Rin. The voice grew louder with every passing second, and before I knew it, it was right next to my ear, startling me out of my daze. Rin Dover. Hua. I screamed as my hand reached out for the corner of the desk to stop myself from falling. Unfortunately, my efforts proved futile as I inevitably still fell to the ground. Bang. Ugh. With my butt feeling the cold hard ground, I slowly raised my head to see my mother's face looking down at me. She had a rather worried look on her face. Are you okay, Rin? Did something happen? No. Pressing my hand against the ground and picking up the chair, I sat back down. Then picking up the spoon, I took a mouthful of cereal and ate it. Rin. I've got a lot to think about, Don't speak while you're chewing. With a small rag in hand, my mother sat down next to me. Supporting her chin with both hands, she leaned her body a bit. Be honest with me. I can tell that something happened. You can tell your mother, I'm all ears. Lowering the spoon in my hand, I turned to face my mother. My brows soon furrowed and I sighed. Fuck it. I'm going to leave again. Immediately following those words, I closed my eyes expecting my mother to go bonkers. But, To my surprise, I did not hear my mother lose it even after half a minute had passed. Upon opening my eyes, I was surprised to see my mother smiling at me. The sight caused my brows to jump up. Mom. See, it wasn't so hard to tell me, was it? What? Opening and closing my mouth, my head tilted. I was legitimately very confused at the moment. Are you not angry at me for leaving again? Angry. Cocking her head a little, her neat blonde hair gently fell over her shoulder. Plucking her lips a little, she asked. Why should I be angry? Raising my hand to scratch the back of my head, I didn't know how to respond. What's going on? This wasn't the reaction that I had expected from her. Was there something wrong with my mother? Was she sick? Worry instantly flashed across my face. Visit for a better user experience. Don't look at me like that. With a frown on her face, my mother slowly stood up. Taking the rug from the table, she walked toward the kitchen and placed it on the counter. Throughout the entire time, neither one of us spoke as I waited for her to start speaking. In no time she asked me a question. Rin, do you know why I was angry last time? It's because I didn't say anything before leaving. Right. With a turn of her body, I met my mother's eyes. They looked an awful lot like mine. If you know that, then why do you think I'll get angry over you leaving? You're already an adult. What you do with your life is up to you. I can no longer control you like when you were a kid, as your safety was my responsibility. It still is, but considering our circumstances, I can no longer protect you like when you were young. A sad smile flashed across her face as she leaned her body a bit. That's why I'm never going to stop you from doing whatever you want to do. You are strong and I've seen it. Pausing for a moment, my mother let out a gentle sigh. All I ask is for you to tell me when you're going on such dangerous trips. Just so that I don't have to worry about where you are all the time. You can do that for me, no? Okay. Taking my eyes away from my mother and staring at the bowl of cereal in front of me, I slowly nodded my head. I'll do that. As water flowed from the faucet in the kitchen, the sound of the water echoed throughout the room. While putting one of the plates in the sink, my mother suddenly asked, "When are you leaving?" My hand suddenly paused. Bitterly smiling, I answered, "Most likely today." Unfortunately, we couldn't push the trip any further and therefore had to go today. As a matter of fact, I probably shouldn't be here right now. There were also a lot of things that I needed to do in order to ensure that the trip was going to be successful. I had already contacted Small Snake about the little stuff, and so that was fine for now. The real problem was something else. Jing. The plan to kidnap him was still on full steam. But in order for that to work, there were some things that I needed to handle. Ha! A sigh escaped from my mouth. Today was going to be a busy day. As my mother replaced the plate in her hand with a new one, she placed the old one on a rack beside her. For how long are you going to be leaving? I'm not too sure. Like. Exactly at that moment, the kitchen door opened and a familiar figure appeared. While rubbing her eyes with her little fists, Nola held a small teddy bear by its arm. Still in her pajamas, Nola dragged the bear behind her and slowly walked toward the kitchen table and helped herself up. It was clear that she was still sleepy as she took no notice of me who was sitting in front of her. Smiling to myself, I got off my seat and sat down next to Nola. Sleepy. Raising my hand, I gently stroked Nola's head. In spite of this, she did not react as she simply lowered her head so that I could stroke her better. How cute. While thinking of something, I tapped my bracelet once. In the blink of an eye, a large teddy bear appeared in my hand. Hey Nola. The latest understudies are on website. Look. Urging the bear forward, I pushed it toward Nola. When the bear touched Nola, her mind cleared up a little and her eyes opened wide. Wah! She let out a startled shout. A broad smile appeared on my face as soon as I noticed her reaction as I leaned my head to the side. How about it, Nola? Do you like it? Brother. In an instant, Nola's eyes glowed with excitement. Extending both hands, she jumped toward the bear and hugged it tightly. A particularly amusing aspect of the situation was that the bear was almost twice Nola's size, making it appear as if she had vanished. MHH. MHH. Muffled sounds rang out as Nola hugged the bear tightly. The sounds persisted for a couple of seconds before they stopped. Nola. I called out as my brows furrowed. Why did she stop moving? Getting up from my seat, I circled around the bear to discover Nola's figure motionlessly hugging it. Hey Nola. I immediately became startled as I placed my hand on her back and shook her. Nola. I was met with no response. Panic started to set in from there as I shook her even more fiercely. Hey Nola. Boo. Whoa. Startled, I took a couple of steps back and almost tripped on the ground. Raising my head, I was met with the sight of Nola extending her tongue in my direction. Hee. Calming down and realizing that I had been fooled, I glared in Nola's direction. Do you seriously think that you can get away with what you've just pulled? Kaya. No. Mother. He knew. I ticked Nola's sides. Just like most children in the world, Nola was ticklish. In fact, she was especially ticklish. Just tickling her legs would send her crying with laughter. Brother. Stop. Out of mercy, I stopped after 10 seconds. I wasn't cruel enough to punish her for too long. You better have learned your lesson. Yes, sorry brother. I will never do it again. Nola muttered on top of the bear on the floor. It was needless to say that she had learned her lesson as she was having a hard time breathing. A triumphant look spread across my face when I stared at Nola. Lowering my head, our eyes met and Nola stuck her tongue out. Stinky brother. On second thought, let's go for another round. Kaya. Nu? Ahaha. Did something good happen to you? In the midst of putting her shoes on, Edward stared at his daughter. While her face was covered by her hair that was leaning forward, she was currently wearing a long black coat that reached all the way to her knees. Shaking her head, Amanda replied. Nothing in particular. The latest understudies are on website. Is that so? Squinting his eyes, Edward decided to let it go. Turning his wrist, he checked the time. 9:17 a.m. Let's get going. We're about to be late. Okay. Finally managing to put on her boots, Amanda brushed her hair behind her head. After that, she turned around to wave at Natasha, who was staring at the both of them with a warm smile on her face. Have fun, you two. What fun? We're going to work. How about you help out as well? Edward rebutted as he playfully glared at his wife. Have you missed me so much that you want me to work next to you? I do. Edward seriously replied. With a wave of her hand, Natasha's cheeks blushed slightly. How smooth. But I wasn't joking. Oh, you. Clike. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Edward turned his head only to see Amanda leaving the house with a weird look on her face. Hey Amanda, where are you going? Work. Wait for me. Bitterly smiling in Natasha's direction, he followed after Amanda. Clike. Hey Amanda, you can't just leave like that. Closing the door behind him, Edward followed Amanda from behind. Halting her feet for a moment, Amanda turned her head to look at her father. And you can't just flirt in front of your daughter like that. Speechless, Edward closed his mouth and stopped speaking. Awkwardly scratching the side of his neck, Edward came up with an excuse. Amanda, your father and mother have not met after so many years. It's normal for them to. Click. Cutting him off was the sound of one of the apartment doors opening. Turning his head, Edward spotted a familiar figure. Rin. But contrary to Edward's expectations, Rin did not greet him back but just stared in Amanda's direction with a blank look on his face. Most shocking was Amanda's next course of action. Good morning. Walking closer to him, she greeted. Leaning her face closer to him, a mischievous grin spread across her face. Going to work? Yeah. Rin replied with an odd look on his face. Though not exactly flustered, he didn't seem his usual calm self. Odd. Edward's eyes began to squint once he realized this. This was the first time that he had seen Rin lose his composure like this, and the cause seemed to be his daughter. Don't tell me. A sudden thought crossed his mind as he alternated his gaze between Amanda and Rin. You too. Chapter 558. That. Feeling Edward's gaze on me and staring at Amanda, who was closely staring at me, I was left speechless and silently glared in Amanda's direction. Do something. I urged her with my eyes. Turning around, Amanda looked at her father. Yes. Alternating his gaze between Amanda and I, Edward looked to be at a loss for words. He eventually managed to speak. Are you trying to take revenge for what happened this morning? Unexpectedly and much to my confusion, Edward talked about something else entirely. I glanced at Amanda, who gazed at me from the corner of her eyes, and brushed her hair behind her ear. You finally understand? Ugh. A difficult look appeared on Edward's face. Soon his shoulders slumped. All right, I'm sorry. After that, he proceeded to walk all the way toward the elevator. The sudden turn of events left me dumbfounded as I pointed in his direction. What's up with him? Nothing. Amanda gazed at her father's back. Stretching her body a bit, she hummed in joy. Let's just say I took a little revenge for what he did this morning. At my expense? Without answering, Amanda flashed a small smile. Taking a small step forward, she followed her father toward the elevator. I'll see you soon, she whispered as she got into the elevator. The elevator doors soon started to close, and the last thing I heard was Edward's faint whispering voice. Hey Amanda, that was a prank, right? There's nothing really going on between you two, right? Maybe. Yeah, Amanda. This is not Click. This should be all. With a satisfied smile on his face, Kevin clapped his hands together. In front of him were two large bags filled to the brim with goods. With a wave of his hands, the two bags magically disappeared. After that, Kevin tapped the air with his finger. A translucent blue screen formed in front of him. Quest. Information. Stop the Demon King from consuming this planet. Location. Cassaria. Goal. Stop the demon corruption of the planet. Rank. Plus. Requirement for transportation. Ranked core. Total people 3. Reward. Demon King Ascension plus 1 year. Minor realm rank up. Synchronization plus 15%. Penalty. Demon King Ascension 1 year. I hope I'm not too late. He had been delaying this quest for quite a while now, and he was finally going to embark on this new trip. Phew. He let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it doesn't look like the delay has caused the mission to become harder. Kevin feared that his delay in the mission would have increased the mission's difficulty. Fortunately, it turned out to be a needless worry since the system prompt remained the same. Visit for a better _user experience. I better get going. Turning his wrist to glance at his watch, Kevin headed out of the door. Right. When he was about to leave, his feet slowed. As he turned around, he glanced at a picture frame positioned on top of one of his desks. There were two people in the picture. Both bear a striking resemblance to Kevin. Moving to the picture frame, he slowly caressed it and his face softened. Mom, Dad, I'll be leaving for a bit now. The faint sound of his voice echoed through the room. It's going to be a dangerous mission. One that might force me to leave this place for quite a long time, but strangely enough, I don't think there will be much trouble. I've got 2 reliable people coming with me. A faint smile spread across his face as he scratched the side of his nose. They both are weird in their own way, but I trust them, so I'll be coming back soon. Touching the frame, Kevin slowly closed his eyes. I hope you don't miss me too much while I'm gone. Echi. After parking my car and getting out, I gazed at the distant warehouse. Closing the car door and heading there, I sighed. What a headache. The mere thought of what had happened not too long ago caused my head to hurt. Recalling Edward's last words, I involuntarily let out another sigh. He definitely suspects that something happened. This was going to be troublesome. Beep. By pressing my hand against the wall, the metallic door that led to the warehouse automatically opened. Who are you guys again? I heard a familiar voice in the distance as I entered the warehouse. It was shortly after followed by more voices. Oh God. Just how bad must your memory be if you can't even remember what someone told you 10 minutes ago? Hein, do something. Me? What am I supposed to do? I don't know, maybe try knocking your shield against his head. That should knock some sense into him. But it'll get dirty. As I was far, I couldn't quite understand what they were arguing about. But without a doubt it was probably something annoying. Walking toward the main lobby and opening the door, I spoke up. What's going on? My words immediately ended the argument and everyone turned their attention to me. Rin. You're finally here. Finally. To my surprise, the moment I arrived, the rest of the group rushed toward me with bright looks on their faces. They looked like children who had just found their parents. What's going on? Their reaction instantly raised alarm bells inside my head. When had any one of them ever greeted me like this? There was definitely something fishy about the situation. Rin, I've been trying to contact you since last night. Why didn't you answer my calls? Small Snake was the first to complain, looking rather haggard. Staring at him, my eyes flashed with pity. He must have gone through a lot. Did you just pity me? Just your imagination. After taking out my phone and checking it, my brows raised slightly. This was because I had noticed that I had over 20 missing calls. Ah, you're right. You really did call me several times. You think. Small Snake rubbed his forehead. I know that you're busy with a lot of stuff, but what do you think will happen during an emergency if you don't answer? Scratching the side of my head, I apologized. Visit. For the best no_underfruit_g experience. You're right. To be honest, I had never experienced stuff like this in the past as I always tended to check my phone. Yesterday was the only exception, and for so much to happen on the exact day that I did not check my phone, I could only blame my bad luck. Really. I'll make sure to pay close attention to your call next time. After putting the phone away, I looked around the room. I wanted to see exactly what was causing Small Snake to be so distressed. My confusion grew as I looked around and saw nothing. MH, what is the emergency? Everything looks fine. My eyes locked in a certain direction halfway through my sentence and I suddenly stopped speaking. Lightning Dragon? It was there that I spotted a familiar face. With his long hair falling down his shoulder and signature yellow eyes, Lightning Dragon leaned against one of the tables. Similarly spotting me, he greeted. Yo. Yeah, I just Hold on. I was cut off by Small Snake, who alternated his gaze with Lightning Dragon and me. It was then that he looked straight into my eyes. He actually remembers you? Yeah. What kind of question was that? Of course he remembered me. It'd be weird if he didn't recognize me. Ah. But it was at that moment that I suddenly recalled something. Raising my hand to cover my forehead, I gazed at the others and finally understood what was happening. A wry smile spread across my face as I turned my attention back to Small Snake. He has memory problems. No shit. Small Snake answered as he glared in my direction. Shifting my head a little, I silently muttered. Kind of rude. As if you were never rude. Small Snake grumbled with his arms closed. I don't think you understand how much trouble he caused the moment he walked in. I don't. I wasn't exactly there to see it. However, Small Snake's words sounded rather ominous as I suddenly felt an ominous promotion. Glaring in Lightning Dragon's direction, Small Snake raised his voice. The first thing he did as soon as he came into the warehouse was attack us. Attack you? I dumbfoundedly stared at Lightning Dragon. Seriously? Yes. Not just me but everyone else in here. Oh God. While staring in Lightning Dragon's direction, I couldn't help but feel a massive migraine coming my way. Taking a deep breath, I looked at Small Snake. Everyone seems to be fine at the moment. It was probably a short fight, right? Do you see Leopold and Angelica anywhere? Small Snake suddenly asked. Glancing around the room, I shook my head. Now that I think about it, I don't see either of them. Obviously not. The two of them are injured upstairs. What's with the monster you brought? Small Snake stared at Lightning Dragon with lingering fear in his eyes. The same could be said for the remaining others in the room. He was clearly reminiscing the events that happened not too long ago. What about Han Yufei? Then I noticed one person was missing. It was Han Yufei. Visit. For the best no_underscore_underfreed_underfingy experience. Him. Famously known as the babysitter of the group. Small Snake was quick to answer. He's gone to the place you told him to go. He should be back by noon. Ah, I see. He's a lot faster than I expected. After I gave him the Gravar-style location, he immediately rushed there without wasting a moment. As expected of him. He was efficient. Scratching the back of my head, my eyes became serious. How badly injured are Angelica and Leopold? Fortunately, not by much. Small Snake sighed in relief. We were somehow able to calm him down after one of us shouted your name. From there we were able to figure one thing. Oh. My curiosity was piqued. What did you figure out? That everything is your fault. Oi. No need to deny the truth. After staring at Small Snake for a few seconds, I shook my head. All right, fine. It was indeed my fault. When I decided to have him come directly to me, I probably should have thought more carefully. Maybe I should have written in the letter, don't beat people up. Not sure. Let me handle the situation from now on. In any case, I was glad the situation didn't escalate any further. Given Lightning Dragon's strength, he could have most likely beat everyone present apart from maybe Angelica, who strangely seemed to have lost. I'll have to check up on that. After patting Small Snake on the shoulder, I walked toward Lightning Dragon. Lightning Drago. It's Liam. Lightning Dragon suddenly interrupted me. I was taken aback for a moment. Excuse me. I'm Liam, not Lightning Dragon. Ah, right. Indeed. Lightning Dragon was just a made-up nickname for the arena. Now that he was no longer there was no need for me to call him by his nickname. Stopping in front of him, I pointed toward myself. You remember me, right? I do. Liam's answer was fast and quick, surprising me and the others in the room. That's great. I nodded my head in satisfaction. I was glad he remembered me. Now things would be much easier. Unfortunately, my joy was a bit premature as his next words almost knocked me over. I do remember who you are, but I don't know why I'm here. Seriously? Yeah. My lips smacked together. I had already lost count of how many times I wanted to facepalm my face by now. Turning around, I waved my hand at Liam and urged him to follow. Follow me for now. I'll tell you the details soon. I think I know of a way to solve your memory problems. Okay. Nodding his head, Liam complied and followed me into my office. Just as I was about to leave the lobby, I turned to look at Small Snake. Alright, before I forget, a couple of people will come soon. Notify me when they come. Who is C? I had already left before Small Snake could finish his words. I was in a bit of a hurry. Solving Liam's memory problems was the current priority. Chapter 559. Relax your mind for a bit. I pressed my hands against Liam's head and circulated the mana inside of my body. Make sure to leave your mind unguarded. If not, it will hurt quite a bit and I will not be able to do anything. Sure, but... Liam's confused voice echoed out as he slowly opened his closed eyes. Staring right into my eyes, his brows furrowed. What exactly are we doing right now? Shit, he's already forgotten. I smiled while cursing to myself inwardly. Just do as I say. You can trust me. Oka, whack. Liam's eyes suddenly jumped up in shock as the mana inside my body flowed out and activated my skill. Sorry, but this might hurt a bit. I forcefully activated the skill in the midst of his speech. Considering the current circumstances, this was the only option available to me. Whenever I explained what I was going to do to him, he would end up forgetting. If this continued, it would be an irritating, never-ending cycle. Thus, I decided to just do it. Arg. Throughout the room, Liam's pained voice echoed as a white hue spread from my body before swiftly covering everything around me. Relax your mind. I spoke through my gritted teeth. If you guard your mind, all it will do is increase the pain and make it hard for me to help you. In spite of his pain, Liam managed to hear my words and soon stopped struggling as his face relaxed. I sighed in relief when I saw this. Thank God. Things could have been extremely complicated if he hadn't calmed down. Whew. Let's get this over with. I closed my eyes and focused my mind. Instantly, I was bombarded with thousands and thousands of images and scenarios, all of which were scattered apart. The amount was so overwhelming that my brain almost fried on the spot. Thankfully, I had something to help me. With it going at full throttle inside of my mind, I was able to sort out all of the different scenarios inside of my head, alleviating a lot of the burden on my brain. During that time, I began to notice how the images broke apart with every passing second. Is this the reason why he's losing his memories? The moment I saw this strange phenomenon, I realized why Liam's memory was so poor. I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but something inside Liam's head kept destroying his memories. Let's see if I can do something about this. Forcing a quarter of the remaining mana out of my body, the white hue around me brightened up considerably. It was during this time that Liam's memories stopped dissecting. Satisfaction washed over me once I saw this. But this wasn't all. Looking through the memories and finding the corresponding pieces, I slowly brought them together and merged them. And just like puzzle pieces, they slowly combined together. It worked. After observing for a few seconds, I noticed that the two pieces I connected were no longer disconnecting. My eyes lit up when I saw this. It worked. My method worked. Visit for a better user experience. There was now a way for me to fix Liam's memories. Chugging down a mana potion, the hue around my hand expanded. Alright, let's continue. Keep your eyes closed and empty your mind. Repeating the same process again, time eventually flew by. Before I knew it, 30 minutes had passed and droplets of sweat dripped down toward the ground, forming a small pool of sweat. HAA. HAA. The sound of my heavy breathing echoed throughout the room as I struggled to concentrate. It's too much. I shook my head as my brows furrowed tightly. In spite of the fact that I was being helped by the chip in my head, there were still too many memories, and simply put, my mana was already almost exhausted. It looks like I have severely underestimated just how big his problem is. In addition to the insane amount of mana needed to complete this simple task, there were just too many memories to sort through. Had it not been for the chip inside of my head, I would have already given up long ago. I can't. I dropped to the ground as I removed my hands from Liam's head. Ha. While I was heavily breathing on the ground, Liam slowly opened his eyes and blinked a couple of times. Surprise flashed across his face as he scanned the room. I carefully lifted my head and stared in his direction. How do you feel? I've felt better. Liam replied as he blinked his eyes. Massaging my forehead, I decided to test him. Why are the two of us here? To fix my memory problems? Do you remember what you did before coming here? Beat up your people. My mouth twitched at his answer. Nevertheless, I was satisfied with what I heard as I slowly sat up straight. It looks like your memory has improved. It looks like it. Liam quietly mumbled. His reaction surprised me as I tilted my head. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? No. Liam shook his head as his brows furrowed. It's just that I can only recall a select few memories, not all. Ah. Standing up to scratch my body, I reassured him. About that, I've only been able to partially restore some of your memories. It'll take a lot longer to completely restore all of your memories. If ever. I honestly doubted that I could ever fix his memory given the huge number of memories he had. Visit for the best no_underfreed_g experience. Not only that, but the source of his problem was still not resolved. He was still going to forget everything that was going to happen to him in the future. That was not something that I was able to fix. All I did was make it so some of the memories he experienced could not be forgotten. The problem is most likely due to the art that he practices. If it's too much to ask, do you have a copy of the martial art you practice? Liam looked at me as he scratched the side of his face. To be honest, I don't remember. Figured. I waved my hand as I took out a towel to brush away the accumulated sweat on my body. I'll have a look at it during our next session. Pinching my soaked shirt, I proceeded to head out of the room. Now that the treatment was over, I needed to properly rest. I was exhausted. Click. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by a familiar figure sitting on one of the sofas in the room. With a curious look on his face, he seemed to be looking around the place. Kevin. I greeted him. Immediately after I called out for him, his head turned to face me. Rin. Taking a moment to look at me, he was taken aback. What happened to you? Don't worry about it. I sat down on one of the sofas and let out a long breath. Wrapping my arms on top of the sofa, I stretched my body a bit. Let me rest for a bit. At least till our final guest arrives. Guest. You'll know soon enough. Han Clan. As multiple figures sat on nicely carved wooden chairs by the side of the halls, a heavy silence engulfed the majestic clan's halls. At this moment, all eyes were drawn toward the middle of the room where a figure stood. His sleek black hair was neatly pushed behind his head in a pomade style, his back was straight, and he was wearing traditional Chinese attire. He was none other than Han Yufei. Have you found it? A deep voice echoed throughout the room. It belonged to none other than the figure sitting at the forefront of the room. Han Ge. Han Yufei's father and current head of the Han clan. Raising his head to meet his father's line of sight, Han Yufei proudly nodded his head as he extended both of his hands forward, revealing an old and worn-out brown book. It was as he promised. This truly is 5-star sword art, Gravar style. There was a deafening silence in the room as no one spoke. In the midst of the silence, the only sound that could be heard was the sound of the elders' heavy breathing. All of whom were reverently staring at the book in Han Yufei's hand. As expected of a 5-star sword art. Han Yufei thought as he scanned the room with his eyes. A 5-star sword art simply had that much appeal. All of the elders in the room could barely restrain themselves from rushing to him and grabbing the art. Visit for a better user experience. In any case, as Han Yufei gazed at his father, he didn't move. He was waiting for his father's next decision. And he didn't have to wait for long as his father soon opened his mouth and ordered. Make sure you practice the art well. Huh. What? But his next words came as a shock to everyone in attendance. Immediately after everyone processed his words, they all stood up from their seats to protest. Quiet. But before they could do that, Han Ge's voice thunderously reverberated throughout the room. A tremendous pressure erupted from his body as he scanned the room with his eyes. His fierce gaze shook all of the elders out of their thoughts. They soon lowered their heads in shame. Taking a few moments to let the elders calm down, Han Ge gazed in Han Yufei's direction. As you were the one who managed to find the sword art, you will be the first one to practice it. Under my name Han Ge, I pledge not to let anyone take your sword art from you until you have fully mastered it. Me included. Standing up from his seat, Han Ge's robe fell toward the ground. As his gaze swept toward the elders in the room, he continued. Remember this clearly. Our priority is the future of our clan, and Han Yufei is the only one in our clan that is qualified to practice this art. You are all too old. While Han Ge's words echoed once more, the faces of some of the elders turned bitter as they nodded their heads. Taking note of their reactions, Han Yufei sighed in relief. I'm glad I talked to father about this. As he had already taken a small glimpse of the Gravar style, Han Yufei learned that only those who were below the age of 25 could learn this art. For anyone older than that, the result would only end up in their death. Furthermore, even if someone practiced the art at the appropriate age, there was still a high mortality rate. Simply put, the art was far too dangerous to share with the other members of the clan, and most of the people in the room understood this as the Gravar style was quite famous back then. Even then, their reluctance was evident. After discussing it for a bit, Han Yufei and his father decided to let him practice it first before letting the other have it. Although his father wasn't exactly on board with the idea of having his son risk his life to practice sword art, Han Yufei was adamant, and so he had no choice but to agree. After all, the fate of the clan was riding on Han Yufei's shoulders. They would be in big trouble if he failed to master the art. Are there any objections? While his father's voice deeply echoed throughout the room, Han Yufei focused his gaze on the book and silently clenched his teeth. I have to master this at all costs. For the fate of his clan, who was currently under threat from the other clans, and for himself. He had to do it. In front of a large warehouse, a black sedan roared along with the sound of its engine. With it being the middle of nowhere, the sound went unnoticed. When the car stopped in front of the warehouse parking lot, its door slowly rose, revealing a figure inside. When would you like me to pick you up, young master? You can wait here for now. I don't think it will be long. Jean stepped out of the car and placed his hand over its hood. His brows knitted as he gazed toward the distant warehouse. It looks pretty badly maintained. Taking a moment to study the warehouse in the distance, Jean was left confused. Taking out his phone and double-checking the location, his confusion only grew when he realized that he was in the right place. Are these really his headquarters? He couldn't believe it. For someone as wealthy as Ren to have this sort of place as his headquarters. Just how much of a cheapskate was he? Well, whatever. Putting his phone away, he tapped the car with his hand and headed to the building. Perhaps the internals of the buildings are better than the externals. Chapter 560. Have a cup of tea. As I slid the teacup across the table, I smiled. With a skeptical look on his face, Jean sat opposite me. Following that, he pointed to Kevin. What is he doing here? You don't want me here? Kevin replied as he took a sip of the tea. He had a rather hurt look on his face. Jin's eyes squinted as he stared at Kevin. He eventually shook his head. No, never mind. After that, he extended his hand and grasped the teacup that I passed to him. As he brought the cup to his mouth, he asked, So what have you called me here for? Let's not get to that first. How about we catch up a bit first? There's no rush. I replied as I took a sip of the tea in my hand. What a delicious tea it was. Furrowing his brows, Jean took a small sip of the tea. But I am in a rush. Smacking his lips together, he brought the cup away from his mouth and stared at it. His brows tightly knit against each other. What's wrong? I curiously asked. Turning his head to look at me, Jean shook his head. Nothing, I just thought that the tea tasted weird. The tea tasted weird? When I turned my head to look at Kevin, he was looking back at me in a similar manner. Taking another sip, Kevin looked at Jean. Strange, I don't notice anything weird with the tea. Following his actions, I also took a sip of the drink. Me too. After smacking my lips together, I looked at Jean. Perhaps it's just you. Maybe. Taking another sip of the drink, Jean frowned again before putting the drink down. I don't like it. Pity. I also put the teacup down. Brushing my hair back, I leaned back on the chair I was sitting on. As I pried my lips out, I asked. Anyways, did you think about my previous offer? The one about going somewhere with you? Yes. I subtly nodded my head. Since it had been some time since I had last offered him the deal, there was a chance that his decision had changed. I prayed that this was the case. It's still a no. However, Jean didn't seem to have changed his mind as he shook his head once more. If you had asked me another time, I might have been able to come, but I am currently extremely busy with clan-related matters. Is that so? The latest understudies are on underfiv.website. Tapping the armrest of my chair, I frowned. Does this have anything to do with Edward's return? When those words left my mouth, Jin's expression changed a little. Bingo. I thought to myself as I took notice of his actions. As expected, he really is worried that Edward might do something. What if I can guarantee you that Edward will do nothing until your return? Will you consider my offer then? Jean raised his brow in surprise as he heard my words. Are you saying you can stop Edward from doing anything while we're away? Yes. I firmly nodded my head. Given the fact that I saved his life, I didn't doubt that he would listen to my simple request. Jin's face turned serious as he covered his mouth with his hand. For the next couple of seconds he didn't say anything as he looked lost in his own thoughts. Meanwhile, I looked at Kevin, who was similarly looking at Jean. He was clearly hoping that Jean would accept the proposal, but I still can't. Jean once again shook his head. Placing both of his hands on the armrest of the chair, he helped himself up. There are a lot of things that I need to handle at the moment. Even if you somehow are able to stop Edward from acting, I don't think that I will be able to calm. Jin's fumble became more prominent, and it didn't take long for him to understand that something was wrong as his eyes opened wide. His line of sight instantly fell toward the teacups. Why, you. As he took a knee to the ground, he placed both hands on his throat. The look of shock and betrayal on his face as he lifted his head to stare at me was evident. How you'd owe this to me? My apologies, Jean. Pressing my hands on the armrest of the chair, I also stood up. I then pointed at Kevin. I would like to start by saying that this is all Kevin's idea. Oi. Kevin reached out for my arm and glared at me. Staring back at him, I relented. Alright, fine. It was my idea. Jean remained silent throughout the entire time, glaring in our direction. If eyes could kill, I'd probably have died many times over by now. My heart almost ached for him as I stared at him. What a poor soul. In an effort to meet his eye line, I lowered my body to meet his gaze. My sincere apologies, Jean, but since you kept refusing our offers, we were left with no other choice but to excuse me. I meant give you a helping hand. Believe me, had there been another choice, I wouldn't have done something like this. Maybe. Extending my hand, I patted Jean on the shoulder. Anyhow, sleep for now. By the time you wake up, you will be on a fun adventure with Kevin and I. The latest episodes are on website. With a glare that was many times more intense than before, Jean mustered all of his strength to raise his hand before giving me the middle finger. Fuck. Ku. Thump. Those were the last words Jean uttered before he passed out. That was kind of rude. Scratching the side of my head, I stood up to look at Kevin. Operation Kidnapping Jean complete? Just stop. Pitifully staring at Jean, who was passed out on the ground, Kevin sighed. Crossing his arms together, he asked, "What do we do now?" "Go to his driver and tell him that Jean is going to stay with us for a while." "What? Why me?" I looked at him with an all-knowing look. "Do you really need to think about it?" If there was one person in the human domain that was thought of as a kind and humble hero, it was Kevin. The driver might just believe him if he was the one telling him that Jean would stay with us for a while. Of course, those weren't the only preparations I made. Tapping onto my bracelet, I tossed Kevin a small UBS drive. "Also, give the driver this and tell them that it's from Jean." "What's this?" Catching the USB drive, Kevin skeptically looked at it. Waving my hand, I urged him out of the room. "Just do as I said. We don't have much time." "All right." As Kevin clutched the device in his hand, he nodded his head and left the room. "I'll go tell the driver now." "Good." Click. A sudden silence filled the room as he closed the door behind him. Silently mumbling to myself, I stared at Jean still on the floor. I better get to work. It had been an hour since then, and we were standing in the middle of my private training grounds. "It looks like you spent a lot of money on this place, right?" Kevin asked as a dumbfounded look spread across his face. "The place looks just as advanced as the training grounds as the lock in the Union." "Well, yeah. That's the whole purpose." While staring around the training room, my heart started to bleed. As I thought back to the amount of money I spent on this place, tears started to fall by the side of my eyes. I spent way too much money on this. Enough to make me want to regret my decision. You really have too much money in your hands. Do me a favor and set up the portal for now. I would appreciate it if you didn't remind me of this. I snapped at Kevin while pointing toward the middle of the training grounds where there was an empty space. Visit. For the best no_free_G experience. Don't worry about something going wrong. I didn't spend so much money on this place for nothing. If something truly goes wrong, I'll knock you out and bring you out of the place. All right, I trust you. With a nod of his head, Kevin carefully walked toward the center of the training ground before stopping. Thinking of something, he turned around to look at me again before pointing in my general direction. "Is Jean going to be fine like that?" "Him." As I glanced over my right shoulder to see Jin's passed-out figure, I waved my hand. "There is no need to worry about him. Set up the portal now and stop wasting time." "Fine." Turning around and nodding his head again, a dark green orb metallized in his hand out of nowhere. It was the rank core that was needed in order to set up the portal. In a hurry, Kevin brought the orb forward before it vanished magically. An instant later, a white ball the size of a ping-pong ball appeared in front of Kevin. Mana started to spiral toward the ping-pong ball in the air, distorting the space around Kevin. In no time at all, the mana in the air rushed toward Kevin before continuously circling the white ball. Within a minute, the spiral had grown to twice Kevin's height, and a portal soon started to form. In the air, the mana density increased with every passing second, and by the time the portal formed, the mana density became extremely thick. With sweat trickling down the side of his face, Kevin turned to look at me. D1. A portal. Opening his eyes, Jezebeth gazed into the far distance. Peering through space with his eyes, his gaze on a particular planet, Earth. His brows furrowed as his eyes locked onto his planet. More specifically toward a thin white layer covering the planet. Trying to peer through the space around Earth, Jezebeth's energy quickly dissipated. "I'm still not strong enough." There was no change in expression as he realized this. It was within his expectations. After all, he knew that it would still take him a few more years in order to break the last protective barrier protecting the Earth, or more specifically, the layer designed to protect Kevin, the Akashic holder. Nevertheless, just because Jezebeth couldn't kill him on Earth, it didn't mean that he couldn't kill him elsewhere. It was precisely because of this that his mind was extremely alert at this moment. After all, Kevin was planning to travel to another planet. While Jezebeth was focusing his gaze on Earth, he suddenly noticed something. His brows jumped up in surprise. Why do I sense 5 more points concentrated with Akashic laws? At this moment, Jezebeth realized something was amiss. Although he couldn't see through the planet barrier, Jezebeth could tell from a glance that Kevin had used the Akashic powers to create 5 linkage points. But exactly for what reason had he done that? Jezebeth soon fell into a state of deep contemplation. I understand. It didn't take long for Jezebeth to understand what was going on, and the expression on his face darkened. This must be your backup plan. With his hands raised to face the Earth, Jezebeth closed his eyes slowly. This might set me back a bit, but... A crack began to appear in the space around him and the world around him began to twist. Prick, prick, prick. It's worth it if it can help me kill you faster.